The Depth to Delve Deep by Rote Writer. Chapter 31. History. The holy island of Iona, as Rote learns, is on the west coast of Scotland, south of the Outer Hebrides and the southern Inner Hebrides, all island chains. He learns these things through the many visits to the college, before, during, and after finishing with his job. It's where he spends a lot of time surfing the internet. Iona is considered consecrated ground ever since St. Columba, a missionary born of Irish nobility, makes his mark with the first monastery in Scotland. It's the birthplace for Christianity in Scotland. St. Columba is christened with bringing Christianity to the Scots like St. Patrick does 100 years or so earlier for the Irish. They convert and collect their respect during the 5th and 6th century. After discussing this with the fellows from the convent, they elaborate on his information in the areas they know. The convent crew are quite the collection of thinkers, each with his own perspective and approach to anything brought up in a conversation. Rote, being the mouthpiece for topical discussion, turns that smoke-filled tea room into a den of delightful debate. Before Rote arrives, the conversation circles around last night's football game and not much more. The topic of football, unfortunately, has many overtones and overtures that the religious rancor running through the history of Scotland and Ireland can be seen. Rote has seen. There are two teams the convent crew undoubtedly are determined to root for. The two Scottish Premier League's biggest rivals are the Celtics and the Rangers, one loved by the Catholics, the other loved by the Protestants. Aye, it's all in fun, the banter, the bravado, and the bashing. Rote listens in on the rivalry broadcasted every other night while the crew croons in the convent tea room. Rote leaves the tea room and attends a Gaelic mass one Sunday morning just to hear the language, and he does. It's a beautiful language, and when he hears a tiny gathering of senior Scots sing, the sound resounds within him. One in attendance is a compatriot of his own country, and the two find common ground. He mentions there are more people in his country back home who can speak Gaelic than in Scotland. Rote listens as all gathered sing. It sounds so beautiful. It reminds him of many popular Celtic singers who still sing in their beautiful language. He wonders how such an old sound can be categorized as New Age. Another misnomer for sure. The music is older than the hills, back to the bards and the warrior poets in ancient Celtic colleges like at Clonmacnoise in Ireland. Aye, when the world is a real dark place, Celtic people play the pipes, the harp, the lyre, the lute, and wrote. It's a story. It told a story. Their story. The songs warmed the hearts of the people with merriment, sadness, put those asunder in slumber. After attending the Gaelic Mass, Rote senses things are somewhat strange. They're not allowed to set up their Mass in the main part of the church. Rather, the prebster corrals them in the back room of the church. Rote learns it's not a church, but a kirk, the Grey Friars Kirk. And between the 15th and 16th centuries, the kirk sees a lot of the signings and secret meetings spurred on by the See of St. Andrew. It also succumbs strategically to the struggle between the two religions and raging war in Scotland. The Presbyterians, backed by the Protestants found in the lowlands of Scotland and throughout England, against the Episcopalians, backed by the Catholic Jacobites found in the Highlands. The past pinch Rote's outside in the Greyfriars churchyard, attending each gravestone still standing. He even visits the one toppled over, or just leaning, like the Tower of Pisa. The stone slabs are old, so old and worn it seems hard to make out what's written on them, if anything. After Greyfriars Kirk, Rote begins a tour de moor around Edinburgh, visiting every graveyard. He finds there are many to be found. A few folks clad in black, coincidentally attending every cemetery at the same time, seem more interested in him than the themed scene. It gives Rote the shivers. Shivers aside, what amazes him is the amount of misplaced and seemingly abandoned gravestones found everywhere, including places other than a graveyard. It seems so many people have died in Scotland since the Stone Age that it's probably hard to keep up with whom, when, and where they all are. Let alone are they worth remembering. Apparently, only money makes the mark, while the ones less fortunate are not only trampled in life, they're simply trampled in death. One name catching Rote's attention in one of the graveyards, either in Edinburgh or the others, he's seen in Stirling, Glasgow, or elsewhere. He's seen so many. Is the gravestone of the famous Scottish philosopher David Hume engraved on it. Rote also spots some other Scottish notables, not noteworthy enough to remember, but nonetheless notable to mention. He returns to the convent and collapses inside the tea room to plot his path to Iona. It's where some of the oldest graves and stones are to be seen, representing the ancient kings of Scotland and Ireland. Out of the tea room he plans his passage, a pilgrimage. By working out the cost to get there and back, he is prepared to spend all the money he has over this Easter weekend excursion. All he has left from his first employer's last check and the 30-odd quid given generously by the cleaners at the college hold on his behalf. After tallying the costs for the various ferries and buses, he figures he can afford a return fare. That will leave him with empty pockets, meaning no possibility to pay for accommodation there. For food, he'll have to fend for himself. Now all he has to do is convince the sisters his excursion is a spiritual journey. He'll do so knowing the religious and historical significance of the island. Rote rhetorically proselytizes the necessity of it all. With that, the sisters offer their blessing for the journey. He's assured as well his bed will be there upon his return. The next day he buys a return trip by coach to Oban, the gateway to the Isles, a port town from where the ferry leaves to Mull, an island off the coast of western Scotland in the Inner Hebrides. That Wednesday, March 27, 2002, commemorates the same Wednesday before Good Friday. St. Columba returns to Iona at the end of his life's work, to the place where his blessings begin. While preparing for his early Thursday morning departure, Rote offered several supplies from his comrades at the convent. Probably the most charitable offer is when one of the fellows loans his prized possession. It's on the same scale as a snail giving its shell. He hands Rote a shaggy mantle, his army-style sleeping bag, the very one keeping him warm through the many wet winters while wandering around homeless, living on the streets of both Edinburgh and Glasgow. This fellow is a road warrior in the truest sense of the word. Even before the offering, he tells Rote some of his exploits, how safe he feels regardless of where he is or whom he's with, knowing he has a warm roll to sleep in, outside somewhere from harm's way. Judging by some of his stories, it appears it's a lot safer to sleep outside than in some of the illustrious shelters alluded to in an earlier conversation in Scotland's two biggest cities. Rote accepts graciously, understanding the gravity of the gift. Another fellow offers his backpack. This fellow is perhaps responsible for 90% of the haze filling the smoke room day and night. He's a chain smoker. He smokes the foulest smelling tobacco found on the market. The dregs of the dregs, bagged and cheaply sold. He's pushing 60 with a bum leg. Rote thanks him for the offer. The woman offering her time once a week gives him several tangerines and a smile so warm he melts. And for further sustenance, he purchases a box of cheap trail mix. With 3 tapped bottles of water, he's ready to go. Though not before Rote purchases a big, bright orange plastic garbage bag the size of a double bed for 2 quid. The seafarer is set to sail.